Welcome back, guys, to another long-awaited episode of Bodies, Barbells, and
Bagels.
So today, I'm going to hand over the reins to old McLeany Trained, and he's going to kick it off with a training-focused episode. So, take it away. What are we talking about today?
Today, what I wanted to go into is the battle of exercises.
Like a rap battle?
Exactly, a rap battle. So, who would win in a rap battle between a front squat and a back squat? You know, which one's Eminem? Which one's Drake, exactly.
I'll be Drake.
You'll be Drake? Okay, that's cool, because Eminem's a badass.
You're definitely whiter
and white
than me.
as fuck. But basically why we're doing this is because a lot of questions we get asked is one exercise better than another, or why am I being programmed this over this?
I want to do this, but this person on Instagram does that. Why can't I do that?
Yeah, there's a multitude of exercises out there, but not all of them are suited for you or for your goals. So basically what we'll do is we'll break it down into the difference between two exercises, and then we'll look at them morphologically for you. So biomechanically, are you built to do the exercise well, or should you be doing some form of a different one? And also, does it suit your goals?
Yeah, because at the end of the day, just because somebody else is doing something and they have a fantastic physique, that doesn't mean that you're going to get that physique from training the way they're training, because they might actually be training to try to get bigger quads.
Yep.
And then you've already got bigger quads and you're wanting to get yours smaller, but you're training the same way as them. So definitely, I think for females especially, I probably see this very, very commonly online, and it's a bit of pain to my soul, and but at the same time, you got to be patient with clients and getting them to understand the why behind why we select certain exercises. And also the other thing that I think Shawnee didn't quite touch on there, but was that how advanced someone is as well. If you're not advanced and able to actually perform something like a deficit snatch grip deadlift, then do you need to do it?
It looks
probably
cool.
not. Yeah, I had one of my clients probably listening message me the other day, and she saw me performing a banded RDL, rear banded, and she messaged me and she's like, "That looks really cool. Can I have it in my program?" And she's only on her first program with me. And I'm like, look, that is quite a difficult exercise to set up, to control, all of that. It looks fancy, it looks cool, but to be honest, I don't put that in a ton of my newbie clients. It's not to say...
It does look cool, though.
It does look cool. It's not to say that you can't do it, but it's just that, is that beneficial for you right now, and is that what you need to be performing, or is it just too overly complicated? Because overly complicated does not mean better. So just because something's got a band or a chain or a this or a that, people I think seem to keep looking for the best exercise when they're often the best exercise is the most simple one that targets the muscle group the most efficiently.
Absolutely.
Which is the goal. Yeah.
Which is most people, isn't it? It's like your aim is to get into the gym, hit as many muscles either in the whole body or the part of the body that you're trying to hit as efficiently as possible. You're not going to go in and just hit your rhomboids.
No, exactly. And it's almost like the same as the approach that I guess we encourage our clients to take with nutrition, in the sense of you don't overtly need to complicate things that don't need to be complicated. You don't need to stress about not eating carbs and fats together in the one meal, or this and that. And it's kind of the same with training, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, they're the same sort of thing, really. So, all right. So, I think we'll kick it off with a lot of these are going to be lower body.
Of course.
But because lower body are the badass ones, we're not going to go into a lateral raise versus the variations of all lateral raises.
No.
I don't actually wanted to, but we're going to stick to mainly the big compound ones, just because that's obviously the meat and veg of your training programs.
Yeah.
So I think we kick it straight off with the old front squat versus back squat. So front squat versus back squat, front squat, again, let's go straight into it, that it's an advanced exercise.
Very advanced.
I personally cannot do a front rack very well at all because I have overdeveloped forearms and a huge lack of mobility and flexibility through my wrists. You need a huge amount of thoracic extension. You need your shoulders to be really mobile as well. So you're thinking upper spine needs to be mobile, your wrists need to be super mobile, they also need to be super strong. You need very good shoulder mobility as well, and you need to be able to squat perfectly straight.
Yeah, so if you've got any tightnesses, ankles, hips, all of that below,
that's another one, ankles.
That's going to be an issue. So, and then also front squats, I do believe comes down a lot to dimensions of the body, but also that's also back squats.
What you got to next?
Yeah, so front, I'd say the biggest struggles for females is wrist strength and mobility. So generally when I front squat, I have to use wrist wraps because it gives that ability to stabilize a lot better.
Even I do.
And then you've got the option of how you're actually placing the bar in a front squat. Are you crossing your hands over or are you elbows through? I generally encourage elbows through because you get more, I guess, balance with the bar and more stability than across. But across is better if you've got any tightness in your pecs, shoulders, can't actually get the elbows up. Yeah. But I find that position a bit wobbly. But that's
crossed arm. Well, for me, it defeats the purpose of doing a front squat.
Yeah.
The whole purpose. I don't program front squat solely to build the squatting muscles, which incidentally are mainly quads in a front squat. Because if you think about, let's talk about biomechanics. So you're thinking from the midline of the body. So if you were to drop the bar down to the floor and where it lands through your body, that's the midline. So you're thinking from midline to knee, that's a huge moment arm on a front squat.
Yeah.
So that's the main focus. From the midline to the hips, so going backwards, it's quite a short moment arm on a front squat. So lots of quads. If you cross the arms over, you're taking out a lot of the thoracic extension.
Yeah.
In order to be able to hold the bar and I can squat more in a front squat when I do that, but then the whole purpose is thoracic extension in the spine. So you're trying, I use a front squat a lot for tall people.
Yeah, I love it for tall people.
Even on a Smith machine, people diss the Smith machine, but it's pretty badass for stuff like that.
People with really long torso and really long legs, it's great. Yeah.
I mean, front squat versus back squat, a pretty easy one. A front squat's very advanced.
Yeah. And the thing that I always program if a client isn't ready, and usually a precursor to a front squat is usually a goblet squat.
Absolutely.
And that's an amazing exercise that if you can't front squat, I would just do a heavy goblet squat. Honestly, for the majority of people listening, maybe 20% of my girls front squat out of the bunch. And
I really don't program a lot.
It's usually due to tightness issues. They just don't purely have the strength. Not a ton of girls can, front squat more than 60, 70 kilos. So
hell no.
I find that usually that's their upper bodies giving out a lot of the time than the legs and the control through their upper thoracic, like Sean was saying. So I think, you got to come back to your why. Why are you doing it? Yeah.
I think that's it. Is front squat it's an awesome looking exercise. When you see someone loading up, even 100...
Watch a CrossFitter do it.
That's their squat. They'll front squat a lot more than a back squat. Same with an Olympic lifter. You see some of the Olympic lifters. There's a guy, he's a power lifter, Jezza Owapa. He can front squat 400 kilos for reps.
That's insane.
That's just ridiculous. But he back squats 500 kilos. So
yeah, you look at the ratio. Yeah.
But it's advanced. It's a super technical one. The whole point in the front squat is it's got to be suitable for your goal and your sport as well. So if you take a CrossFitter and an Olympic lifter, they do the snatch, they do the clean and press. They basically need to front squat.
Yeah.
If you're looking at a power lifter...
Yeah, so then why do people use that as an accessory movement? What would they be trying to work on?
Trying to build the quads, power out the bottom of the squat. Because if you think
stronger
about...
thoracic.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Stronger thoracic, staying more upright.
I find it can actually help carry over with deadlifting a lot as well.
Yeah.
That's why
because
I like
of
the front squat. Because of the thoracic extension and the core as well. So, I like it. I probably program front squats more for a deadlift accessory than a squat accessory sometimes, especially with also driving out of the deadlift. So if a lot of people don't have a lot of leg drive, then I really love a paused front squat because then...
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes.
We get excited about programming.
Yeah, so a paused front, I actually love doing that after deadlifts sometimes in a program.
Yeah.
So definitely for my power lifters, that's probably a big one, even 1.5 front squats, which are really nasty. And again, you've got to think, well, why are we doing these things? It's not really focused on hypertrophy, a pause or a half rep. It's more focusing on a weakness there.
Neurological training as well.
Exactly. So, I guess let's talk, prime movers. So we've talked about the front squat. So what are the prime muscle groups in a back squat?
I think that can move us on to high bar versus low bar, really.
Yeah.
Which you could then differentiate the prime movers. High bar, low bar. So a high bar is pretty much a front squat taken slightly back in the midline a little bit. So you're bringing a little bit more of the midline to hip moment arm in. So there are some glutes and hamstrings in there, but again, it's still very quad dominant.
Yeah.
So prime moves, quads, then sort of glutes and hammies. Still a lot of thoracic extension. I find that the best high bar people, you're looking at morphology. Mm-hmm. So if you have the sort of shorter shins, shorter quads, and a longer torso, you can just stay more upright in a squat. So if you look at yourself when you squat in the mirror, and you can squat all the way down fairly narrow, like hip to shoulder width apart, and you can stare at yourself in the mirror without really leaning over, you're probably a high bar squatter.
Yeah, and I think also look at your genetics and ethnicity, and we're saying this without being racist and being
100%
cautious
fact.
with our words, but if you look at, so let's say, for example, Asian cultures, more so Chinese in particular, why are they such good Olympic lifters, front squatters? Like, because their legs are generally short.
Look at the calves on Chinese.
Yeah, amazing.
They have epic calves because they have short insertion points.
Exactly.
So shorter shins.
That's why they're good bodybuilders too.
Yeah,
amazing, amazing bodybuilders. But what aren't they built for? They're probably not built for swimming. For sports where you want that long sort of thing. Basketball, you got Yao. What's his name? Yao Min. Yeah, I mean, you got him as an outlier. But like generally, how many sort of freaky Chinese basketballers do you get?
There's not many, is there?
Nah, and so that's the thing. Look at like your genetics and ethnicity is a big thing. Look at someone like a Russian, like a Klokov, he's probably getting a bit of an outlier, but
he is an outlier. That's it.
But he would probably more be built. Like, I'm trying to think. Has he got long legs?
No, he's got shorter sort of legs, but then he's changed his morphology, because if you look at the way Klokov walks, he's got a bow in his legs.
Oh yeah, crazy
huge bow in his legs. So he's technically shortened his lever lengths.
Yeah, exactly. So looking at all those type of things, I'm trying to think of a culture that's more
there's literally something called a Celtic hip.
Yeah, like longer. I'm thinking like, okay, what about like a marathon runner, like a Kenyan? They've all got these huge long legs. Like, imagine them trying to do a high bar squat.
Yeah.
Like, it would take so long to get down. They'd be like, oh,
that's like Grant, one of my clients. He's 6'8". He's like 6 foot of legs.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, when people, they say, oh, I'm tall, should I squat?
Where are you tall?
Where are you tall? It's like, if you look at Thor, world's strongest man, he's perfectly built to do big squats.
Yeah, like I'm 5'4", but I have really long legs. Yeah. So I have to low bar squat. Or I'm okay with fronts, but I can't really do a high bar very well. Yeah. And that's, like exactly like Sean said, we get it all the time with our female clients. I'm so tall, I can't high bar. And it's like, you're actually not. Yeah.
Where are you tall? So, well, if you look at what's called a Celtic hip, so it's basically, if you look at the hip socket, we're looking at how deep your hip socket genetically is. In general, you can't literally don't go and get an x-ray, but more often than not, if you have some form of Celtic background, you've got what's called a Celtic hip, which basically your head of your femur sits very deep into the acetabulum, the hip socket. So if you squat very, very straight, like a high bar or a front squat, you're going to hit your femur on the front of your hip socket.
Yeah.
So it all jams up. So you have to go really wide, and then you have to squat with your legs going more out at 45 degrees.
Because over time, if you don't do that, you can run into a lot of problems.
Labrum tears, impingement. So if you're like solid white person like me, Irish background, Scottish heritage, Viking heritage.
But then again, me and you, comparative with our heights are pretty equal for our sex. So, like, I would say, what are you, 5?
I'm shorter in average, yeah.
But we're pretty similar. But you've got a much longer torso and much shorter legs than me. And you've also got shorter shins too. So
no, I've got longer shins.
You got longer shins than me?
Shorter quads.
Sorry, my bad. But you've
got short shins, long quads.
But you suit a high bar, I think, personally, a lot better. You feel like you like
I'm low bar, 100%.
But I don't know. I think you high bar squat very well as well. I think you can get away with both, whereas I can't do both.
Because this is the thing, is because femur length is very different.
Yeah.
So I have shorter femurs, which is a better morphology than longer femurs for big bad squats.
Yeah, but then you
can sumo better.
But then you have such a wide stance on your low bar.
Used to, not anymore, but yeah.
Yeah, and again, that kind of comes back to stance. And when we say stance, that means not only the width of your feet, but also the kind of angle that your toes are facing and your feet are facing. So you'll see some people squat with quite straight feet. Some people squat with a huge turnout. So it really kind of comes back to all of those variables. And again, there isn't one best stance. There's not one but there is a best stance for your body, if that makes sense.
For
so
sure.
there's not
one best for everyone.
General best stance, you know, and that's a question I get asked a lot, is how wide should I be squatting? And I'm like, well, it depends. So if you are trying to, I guess, figure out your best stance, then I guess the biggest advice would be play around with a few. See where you not only hit the best depth, but you're also able to keep your knees out and you're the most explosive out of the rep.
Yep.
So they're probably the things, and which is why I always suggest clients to film their squats from either the front or back as well as the side, because you can't really see a lot from the side, but you can see a lot more from the front and back in terms of, I guess, more your setup and your hip dip and shifting and knees falling in and out and all of that. I really like filming them from the back because I can also see if the feet are, if you're able to keep the weight more so pushed towards the outside of your feet, or whether you're rolling in and you're, you know, arching.
Well, from the back, you can look at the pelvis. And if you can't see the knees, then they're inside the pelvis.
Exactly.
If they're outside, then they're doing it right. So I'd say stance-wise, it's basically... The whole point in the squat is you're trying to squeeze your pelvis between your legs. So you want to go as narrow as you can, because then you get more of a drive into the floor. Yeah. As long as you can dip your hips through your legs.
Yeah. And I think then that comes back a lot as well to hip width on different people, and then, like you said, the structure of the pelvis.
Yeah.
Like if you have really narrow hips, then you're probably not going to be squatting super wide. No. Like if you have...
You probably are a front squatter and a high barrer. You see a lot of the CrossFitters that have
narrow hips.
Very narrow hips tend to be high bar front squats and all that. I'm not saying everyone.
Yeah, I wouldn't agree with that. Yeah, because a lot of my girls have very narrow hips and long legs and awkward dimensions.
True.
But I think that you've got to really think about all of those things. Like look at how narrow I squat for a low bar and with narrow and all of that. It's quite narrow. Same with Lane Norton as well. He's changed his now. It's changed.
Okay, I'll have to rewatch one of
these. So we're both going to argue about this.
I'll have to rewatch his video.
Yeah, and again, this is even where it comes back to coach. There's going to be slight variances that we're going to say, try this, try that. And I think it takes a long time to perfect your squat setup. And even you've changed yours over the last few months. So why did you change it?
Injuries.
Just injuries. A bit more detail.
Pretty much. My lower back's fucked. So if I squat too wide, I put too much pressure from external rotation, because I don't struggle with external rotation, but then I'm fully shortening my glutes in the bottom of a squat, and I just feel a lot of pressure right through my sort of sacral region and lumbar. So if I narrow it, then I'm trying to use my legs more than my hips, basically.
Yeah.
Hence why I'm trying to do like front squats and high bars at the moment, as opposed to low bar. I'm stronger in a low bar, but then I don't really need to look at building my glutes much more. So I've taken them a bit narrow. I've worked a lot more on my ankle dorsiflexion mobility, which is another huge one. If you have no ankle mobility, you could be perfectly made to front squat and high bar squat, but if you don't have the ankle mobility, then you're always going to push backwards in your squat into your hips, or you're going to lean over. So that's a huge one. Morphologically, like me, I feel like when I hit the bottom of a squat, I jam up in the front of my shin to foot area. So morphologically, there's some bone structure there. I have very thick ankles, girthy ankles. Cankles, yeah. But I've stretched them as much as possible. They just don't seem to stretch anymore. So if I front squat a high bar, which I can now, then I use my ollie shoes.
Yeah. Can come back to calf tightness a bit too as well, and like all of that. When we say ankle mobility, it really encompasses, the ankle, your Achilles as well, tightness there, not so much just the ankle. Like we're saying lower body mobility, so ankle, calf, Achilles, hammies, everything.
Tibialis.
All of that. Anterior. So I think like all in all, with front and low, like front back squat, low bar, high bar is what I'm trying to say. So let's kind of summarize that to keep it a little more simple for everyone listening, because we did have a few questions on that. And then a girl saying that she wasn't sure if she should keep high barring or just give up on squats altogether. At the end of the day, if something doesn't feel right, there's something wrong, either biomechanically or you've got a mobility issue. So you've got to figure out what's stopping that squat from looking good. And it can sometimes just be mobility, and you can then work on that. But this same girl had said she's done everything mobility-wise, improved her ankles, improved her hamstrings, still not able to hit a decent high bar squat. just try a low bar squat. Like,
you don't have
to high bar squat. I never high bar squat. It feels so retarded whenever I do it. So you don't have to high bar. You also don't have to low bar. Another big question is, what muscle groups are you trying to build? Like, low bar squat has higher rates of glute activation.
Yeah.
So for the majority of my girls, they often are low bar squatters. For that reason, if their biomechanics can perform it efficiently. Of course, I've got some people who still high bar, but again, it comes back to all these variables. What are you trying to achieve? What are your biomechanics allowing you to do? And what are the mobility issues that maybe you just need to work on to improve the range of motion? If you can think about all those three, that's really what we would go through with our clients. Then you're on the right path. But sometimes it's just like people making broad statements like, oh, I'm not a high bar, but then they've never worked on their ankle mobility, or they've never done this or that.
What in your chain is stopping you from being a high bar?
I
was never a high bar before, purely because my ankles were that bad. Now I stretched them a bit, I can somewhat high bar.
See, when I high bar, I feel like I'm just going to fall forward. Like, it just doesn't look...
That's where the ollie shoes come in.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing. Like, footwear is definitely a big one in this regard.
Are you squatting in trainers?
Well, then
you shouldn't be. It's like squatting on a mattress.
So your main two types of squat shoes that you're looking at are going to be a chuck, a flat sole shoe,
Converse,
something like that, with no sort of sponginess in the heel, or you're going to have a heel raise and a flat sole powerlifting shoe. So they're your two options. You very generally speaking see people in a high bar squat use more of a heel raise, and that's obviously to aiding in the ankle and hip mobility, because you need more for that lift. So you see a lot more low bar squatters squat in a flat shoe, because obviously you're shifting the hips backwards rather than down, so you don't need as good of hip mobility technically to perform a low bar squat as you would for a high bar. So, but that being said, you can still wear an ollie shoe and low bar squat, like a lot of people do. And for me, that's more ankle mobility than hip mobility. Snapped a few ligaments in my left one. It's never as good as my right ankle, and so if I squat flat shoe, I tend to hip shift because of that ankle issue, and that's what can sometimes happen. It might only be one side that's compensating, but then that's going to cause a lot of problems, because as soon as you get any form of hip shift in the bottom of a squat, then one side of your lower back takes more load, your glute doesn't fire as well on one side.
It's inefficient.
And that's why, again, we say film it from the back or film it from the front, because you're definitely from the back, you're not going to be able to see what we call hip shift until you film it from the back. And then you can really determine what's going on there. So I think that kind of covers my low bar squat.
I really like, I wish I needed, well, I don't wish I needed, but I find that Converse for low bar and what have you, they're quite narrow shoes. So whereas Olympic lifting shoes or squat shoes are wider, so you feel like you're squatting with your feet in cement. So they're pretty cool. They need to build like I'm sure they have, but is there like a flat Converse that's as wide as
and it's like heavy. It's like the heaviness.
They're fucking heavy, aren't they?
It's the heaviness of the shoe, especially like most of my female clients have got quite skinny feet. So like, and I have quite skinny long feet, so I find the same. And if you're thinking about squat shoes, which we'll touch on briefly, your main two options are your Addy Powers and your Nikes. I've had both in my time, so I could probably give you a pretty good review on the two. The Addy Powers are not quite as high in terms of the heel raise. It's a little bit smaller. And also the Nikes are a lot heavier. So I feel like I'm more stable in my Nikes. They're a more heavy shoe. But if you only need a slight heel raise, I'd probably go the Addy Powers. And you just want a bit more support. So that might be something really good for a low bar squatter that just needs a little bit more, but also they want a good solid support base. Whereas, the Nikes, you put them on and it's like wearing high heels. Like they really jack you up. So again, that's your, dictation of which one you'd go with the powerlifting shoe. The only problem is the Nike only comes in a male shoe size. So as a female, it's going to be wider at the front of the foot, and I have to wear really thick socks when I wear them, whereas the Addy Powers are really long and a slimmer fit.
For a thinner foot, really.
Yeah.
If you've got a fat foot, go the Romaleos, Nike.
Yeah.
If you've got
or
a thinner foot,
wear a couple of pairs of socks.
4 pairs of socks.
Especially because I found I was like between sizes. So mine are a little big for me, and I have to really lace them up as tight as possible, and wear a couple of decent pairs of socks. So there you go, it's footwear tips too.
You need these.
Yeah, they did get asked those ones too.
Yeah, well, awesome. I think it's really important.
All right, next one.
Box squat versus no box.
Well, pretty straightforward there. But people do box squats very wrong, and that's what I've noticed.
Yeah.
So a box squat is a complete deload and reset.
Yeah.
Okay, so we do a box squat generally for a few reasons. So I might program into a client a touch and go box squat, which is very different to a box squat.
Yeah.
A typical box squat means stop, reset, get tight, drive up, rebreathe basically. So if you were doing, say, a touch and go, you would hold your breath, you would touch the box, drive up, no exhale. Generally the box squat depends on the client, but for most of my clients I encourage them to exhale, re-inhale, and then drive up, especially if we're doing like a 2 to 3 second hold, or not a ton of people can hold their breath for a really long period of time. Unless you're doing it as a breathing exercise. But so the big difference with a box squat is obviously that you're not going to full depth generally. Your box squat is generally a 90-degree angle roughly.
Parallel and above I use.
Parallel, so make sure you also know how low to box squat, because if you're doing the same box as everyone else in the gym and you're short as fuck, then you're not actually doing a full box squat, you're doing a partial squat. So make sure,
sit on the box before you set it up.
Exactly.
So
get the right height.
Is it 90 degrees? Is it your perfect height? If the box is too high, then bring your feet up. So you might squat.
Stand on some plates.
You might stand on some plates.
Yeah. Another one I always say to use to the girls is, those steppers like that you have for your pump classes, because then you can at least raise the amount of steppers to the perfect height for you, because not like a bench for 90% of females is way too high. Like an actual typical gym bench.
The ones you can move.
And then those, those silver box jump boxes. I think it's the second one is a pretty good height, but then the first one is too low, and then the third one's way too high. You can just
chuck a plate on it.
Exactly. That's what I do with the low one. So I know that you are trying to squat to 90 degrees with a low bar squat. The other big thing is that you are going to get, obviously you're not going full range of motion. So you're not really working as much on explosiveness out of the bottom of the rep, because you're not having a stretch reflex. You're stopping, resetting, going. So from a power and speed standpoint, you're probably not going to be working on that in a box squat, but you might be working on overload principles. So you can generally box squat heavier than what you can do a normal squat.
It's the rack pull of squats.
Exactly. That's a good way to describe it. So I love using it as a, for somebody who, say, struggles to lock out their squat, or they just don't feel comfortable with a heavy load on their back. Then a box squat is great for that. A box squat is also good for somebody who has a terrible squat and there's no point in them actually squatting, because not everybody needs to squat. So unless you're a powerlifter, you need to squat. But if you're a bikini athlete and you've got your really tall, long legs, long shins, everything's just not ideal for you. Sorry, long quads, short shins probably. Then do you need to squat? If you don't, or you've got...
do you need to squat to below parallel?
And are you better off maybe doing a box squat?
Some people morphologically will never hit parallel.
No.
There's trainers and gurus out there that give them shit and say everyone should squat to parallel or below parallel, and it's I can assure you that not many, but there's some people that just will never reach that. If you're someone that has very short shins, super long femurs, and a very short torso, you'll struggle to get 10 inches to parallel.
And say issues with maybe your ankles and hips as well.
Then you're fucked. And you just can't do anything about that. And that's where a high box squat comes in perfectly.
You'd probably even be able to do a front squat probably. But
then you stick them in, I always stick them in the Smith machine and take out the balance.
Squat.
Hack squats, leg presses. There's you don't have to squat.
No, you don't have to squat. I think deadlifts, I would say 99% of people can do some form of a deadlift. 100% of people. Which is
next.
But so anything else you want to add to, I guess, front and box?
Box squat versus no box, it's you're taking out the stretch reflex. So if you're working on that explosive power out the bottom and you are a power lifter, then obviously you have to go sub-parallel. A box squat, when you sit on the box, and this is what people will get wrong, your shins should be very close to perpendicular. So you're not sitting straight down, and this is what people get wrong. They think you squat straight down like a high bar. So there's a lot of forward momentum on the knees, not much hip back, when in fact it should be perpendicular shins, sit back onto the box.
It's more of a low bar.
And it is. It's a low bar pause squat, and then you're basically working on hip drive. That's why, again...
Like a hip thrust. It's basically a standing hip thrust.
So that's why I actually, oddly, think it works very well at the sumo lockout.
Yeah, I agree.
If you are going to do any form of squat for that. But, Because I find a sumo rack pull is really weird.
I don't like it.
Whereas
I don't
a
mind a
sumo box
sumo block
squat,
pull, but not a rack pull.
Yeah, you'd block pull over a rack pull. It just feels weird, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know, there's not much going on.
No,
but
just speed in the hips.
And also the stance for a box squat. Generally, you're a little wider than your normal squat.
Because you're after perpendicular.
Exactly. So you're not going to get that if you're in a narrow, super narrow. So the big mistakes people make is box squats is not stopping, number one, touching and going when it's meant to be a reset, not adjusting their stance and going a little wider generally than their squat stance, not having that perpendicular shin angle. If you're not sure what it is, give it a Google.
Yeah.
And
straight down on your shins.
Yeah, and then not focusing on it being more of a hip back, low bar.
Yep.
Generally with even the bar position, I would put it in a low bar position rather than a high bar position. So don't sit the bar up on your traps, sit it on your rear delts, make sure that you're, because that will help you obviously push your hips back and drive your chest forward a little bit more.
Yeah.
So, that's pretty much.
I like box squats, but, they're not as functional, I suppose, as your standard normal squat.
But great for hypertrophy of the glutes and, even you get a lot more hamstrings in it too.
Yeah.
So again, if you look at what we've just talked about, if you're trying to build a strong squat, know where you suck. So if you fail at the bottom of the rep and you've got no drive out of the bottom, do front squats, do paused reps in the bottom, do things like that, or more explosive exercises. Then a box squat will be better if you're struggling with the lockout at the top of a squat. You get really shaky when you're almost there. You've got no hip drive in. You've got weak glutes. Like, fantastic for you.
It's a big glute builder.
Yeah, know where you're weak, basically. Yeah.
All right, moving on. Let's go on to deadlifts. So
Yay, my favourite.
We'll go the old conventional versus sumo. I think first things first, let's look at what muscles tend to be worked more. So conventional, you're looking definitely more of a posterior chain. So it's a lot of even the calves. You watch someone conventional deadlift, you see the calves go crazy, but it's basically calves, hamstrings, glutes, and spinal erectors.
Yeah.
When you're going into a sumo, you're adding a little bit more of a quad drive.
Yeah,
so
and also adductors.
Adductors, exactly. So you're more upright in a sumo, so you're turning it more into a leg press per se. There's less, not none, but less spinal erectors. Yeah. Because you are getting your hips closer to the bar, so there's less leaning over. If you're not leaning over as much, you're not extending through the spinal erectors.
You generally have less flexion as well in your erectors in a sumo, where you should. Yeah.
You see people trying to conventional deadlift
a sumo. Oh, it looks horrible.
And it's like, it just means you need to get your hips right into the bar, and you need to work on your adductor flexibility.
They might have what we call a semi-sumo.
You have a semi-sumo,
which there's nothing wrong with that. But
nothing wrong with a semi.
I prefer a full.
A full sumo. We're talking about.
What we mean by a semi is you'll see some people who aren't quite as wide as a typical sumo. Their feet aren't quite as turned out, and their backs generally have a bit more flexion, kind of in between a conventional and a sumo. Yeah. I probably don't encourage coaching that, but if it looks right on someone, then I'll do it. I know two people, obviously, like Lane would be one. Beck Chambers is another one that does it. So, yeah, they're two people that if you go look at them, it's not a typical sumo. Yeah. I think Lane's changed his now since his back injury. Surprise, surprise. Because there's more flexion. But, yeah, I mean, anytime you get more flexion, you're more at risk. So... yeah. This is a big thing, and so what we mean by any flexion is when you see that slight rounding in the back that's going on.
Lumbar and thoracic flexion.
Exactly. Now, we are very, strict on it with our clients. Yeah. We don't want to get sued. I don't want anyone hurting their back. I also don't want my clients injured. Like that's why we encourage it. Yeah. We're not saying it because, a client grinds out a PB and their back's completely round and they're like, why aren't you happy for me? And it's like, because I know you're going to be in pain for the next week and a half. And you're not then activating the right muscles that are efficiently working. So
that's exactly it. Is the whole point in a conventional deadlift is we're talking hypertrophy here, and not snapping yourself, is to build the spinal erectors, extensors.
You can't build
so
them
if you're in
flexion,
you're literally not building your spinal erectors.
No, exactly. And there's a big difference between going into flexion during the lift as opposed to starting in a slightly flexed position. So that's really important to understand. You'll have some people that, especially conventionally, will say that, well, if I'm slightly flexed to start, then my arms become longer. So then the moment arm becomes shorter. Yeah. So
When
get
you're
it.
a powerlifter at the top of the game, I say that's fine.
But I never encourage a beginner to start lifting that way. You are not strong enough in your lower back, like through so many regions, to even bother attempting to lift like that. So just be safe, lift with a neutral spine as much as you can. And sure, when you're going for a 1 rep max, you might get a little bit of that going. But if it's happening on all the reps before that leading up to it, then Also, it's a payoff as well. If you're starting in flexion, so it's easier at the bottom, it's going to be harder at the top to lock out. Exactly.
So just go 50-50, stay straight. So it's going to be sort of neutral in the bottom and neutral at the top.
Absolutely. Yeah, think about it that way. If you're trying to come up and your shoulders are rolling forward, how are you going to then lock that bar out? You have to really pull your lats through hard and then trying to get your hips in. You get a lot less glute activation generally from a flex position as well. So ladies, if you're trying to build your glutes, do not round your back. Like your glutes are off. Like you got to think about it that way too. Which is obviously why sumo, it's easier to get into a more neutral spine because you're a little more upright. That's the main difference. When you're conventionally, you're more shoulders slightly forward and over the bar in your start position, which will then encourage people to slightly round. Also the fact that your hips aren't in the way. So when you conventional, if you've got slightly tight hips, you see a lot of people who can't get neutral because it might be a hip flex issue. And I think a lot of people forget to warm up their hip flexors when they are deadlifting, even more so than when they are squatting or the same amount. So I hear a lot of people go, I did my deadlift warm up and it was, I did some leg swings. I did, some light RDLs. I did some hip thrusts. They did no ankle mobility, no hip mobility. No. So in a conventional deadlift, you need a lot more hip and ankle mobility than what you do in a sumo, which is also why then if you've got major ankle injuries or stuff like that, you might be better off sumoing because simply put, your ankles are actually the limiting factor. Or in that case, I would get someone to probably sumo deadlift and maybe do a conventional block pull as an accessory movement or a rack pull, because then your hips and ankles aren't a limiting factor.
Which is pretty much me.
Yeah.
I sumo a lot more than I conventional because my ankles are shit and I've got a screwed back. So when I sumo, I can take my screwed back out of it and my ankle lack of dorsiflexion.
Even though you can get actually into quite a nice position in your conventional deadlift. But again, this comes back to, even though Sean can make it look nice.
It looks nice.
But it's not comfortable for him. No. Whereas for me personally, if I conventional, my hips are so much higher than where they should be purely because of my dimensions. I don't round my back, but when I start to lift heavy, that does start to happen.
Yeah.
I get to about 120, 130 conventional and I just can't stay as tight as what I do in a sumo.
Because of your long femurs.
Because of my long femurs. Yeah.
So
exactly.
your bar to hip moment arm is really long.
Yeah.
But on a conventional.
It takes me ages to get up. Yeah. But luckily, because I have strong glutes, I don't tend to get a lot of flexion. But if you had weak glutes and long quads, don't conventional, go on sumo.
Yeah.
I think there's a big misconception that people say that sumo is for pussies, and I want to clear that up right away.
I do like to throw that out there.
I'm targeting this at a specific client listening to this that argued with me about her doing a sumo deadlift for a very long time and then did it and was like, oh, these feel quite nice. I'm and Sean, because Sean said it to her.
I may have added fuel to that
Sean
fire.
added fuel to the fire by PTing her and going, no, let's not sumo, it's for pussies. And I'm like, Sean, just because I can sumo deadlift almost as much as you, let's,
Yeah. In percentages.
A lot more. Yeah. I think sumos are not for pussies. Sumos are for your dimensions, okay?
Some of the biggest deadlifts in the world are
sumos. If you can, what's actually the biggest deadlift in the world? Who's got the biggest one at the moment?
Eddie Hall did a strongman 500 kilos, but that's deadlift suit and straps.
Okay.
Kayla Wallum just did 415.
Is that conventional or
sumo? And he's only 100 kilos.
Yeah, so sumo again.
Yeah.
You think about a sumo deadlift, it's actually a shorter moment arm generally. So going from that position, that's why people say, it's a cheats way of doing a deadlift. It's like, well, no, if it's more efficient for you, that'd be like saying it's a cheats way of bench pressing because you've got a bigger arch.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, it is what it is. Accept that and do whatever lift you're best at. Get strong and just focus on getting strong in whatever lift you're good at. I still love conventionals as an accessory lift for my sumo deadlift and my sumo deadlift clients. But again, I said, it might be a block pull, it might be this, it might be that.
Or you choose to do it more for volume rather than the super heavy stuff.
Yeah,
heavy stuff for sumo. Volume stuff for conventional. I just stubbornly tried to do the other way around and just
breaks himself.
Just get injured. So, back to sumo.
Yeah. So the only other thing that probably with sumos is from a growth standpoint, from a hypertrophy standpoint, as a female, you will build your adductors more, and that's probably something I've struggled with over the years. I don't really want my adductors to be any bigger, so I'm always like, oh, I'll try conventional for a while, and then no, I'm worse at it. So I think you've got to dictate why you're doing it, and at the end of the day, if you're only sumo deadlifting, say 4 sets once a week, your adductors are not going to grow out of nowhere. Like, it's you need to be doing
still a muscle that takes ages to grow.
Yeah, you need to be doing a lot of work. And you know what? Strong adductors can have so many positive benefits with other movements, which is why I actually really like programming a sumo or even a sumo kettlebell deadlift to start off with beginners.
Yeah.
Because if you lunge and you squat and you see your knee tracking going like all over the shop, definitely falling in, and you just can't keep your knee out, then that is one of the signs that you either may have really weak glutes or really weak adductors. So a lot of people get then issues with tightness around down the other side. So, you know, around down your IT band, because that's having to overwork when your knees are falling in.
Yeah.
So you want to think
TFL.
about all these things. Yeah, TFL. So why are you doing something, you know, and understanding that, no, your coach isn't trying to get you to have massive adductors. It's just that they might be wanting you to strengthen your adductors for other exercises.
Yeah.
So
You can train a muscle without it actually getting bigger.
yeah, exactly.
You might just neurologically get stronger.
You have to remember, you've got to think volume. So you have to have enough volume through that muscle group for it to grow.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right, moving on. Here's a good one, which kind of moves into another one as well, is touch and go versus complete reset on deadlifts. It's a tricky question because it's neither of them are wrong if done correctly.
Exactly.
But I would say 90% of people don't touch and go correctly.
No, it's disgusting. Like, it's like they bounce, their back's rounding, they smash it into the floor. Like, I cringe when I just hurts my soul when I see it, hurts my back when I see people doing that. And it's an ego thing. That's all it is. Like, if you're touching going for an AMRAP set or a top set and, you know, your coach has programmed it, but when I program an AMRAP for my clients, I still want them to have good technique. As soon as your technique drops, stop. And there's a few gyms, not going to name names, but in Perth that really encourage that touch and go, that grind, that bounce into it. And then their clients just end up getting injured.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what is the purpose of that? That's just fueling your ego. That's not fueling your biomechanics, your lift, your functionality. So
this isn't everyone. Like, this is like, there's some people out there that can touch and go amazing. If you watch a guy called Jesse Norris,
I feel like good bodybuilders can do it well.
Doug Miller, Jesus,
amazing. Yeah,
he does 220 for 20 reps.
But if you're going to touch and go, it should look the exact same as a reset deadlift or normal deadlift. Yeah. You're just going a little faster off the floor.
Yeah.
Like, you want to keep your lats engaged the whole time, and on the eccentric still controlling it so that your back's nice and neutral. That's probably the big one.
I would just say more often than not, again, we're not talking about outliers. What's his name? George Leeson, I think his name is, something like that. He's a powerlifter who can touch and go like 900 pounds, but that's not many people. More often than not, you can complete reset more weight.
Yeah.
And the aim of a deadlift and, you know, progressive overload is to use more weight.
I think it comes a lot down to back strength, upper back.
Yeah.
Not many girls are going to be able to touch and go stronger than they can reset.
Not correctly.
Because of upper back strength.
Yeah. So we, more often than not, almost 99% of the time, will program complete reset. The reason why we don't do touch and go is more often just because most people don't do it properly.
It's dangerous.
You're taking out the very bottom of it. So which moves us on to the next one, which is a complete reset conventional deadlift versus an RDL.
Yeah.
For me, if you're going to do like the touch and go, you may as well be RDLing.
Yeah.
So take out the touch and the slam on the floor, which completely fucks up your technique. Yeah. Control the eccentric, use the stretch reflex off the hammies and the glutes, and just RDL.
Yeah, there's just no... I
Romanian deadlift.
I honestly don't see any point in a touch and go deadlift. Like, I don't...
Do you know what? I think it's this archaic thing of we've now kind of proved that time under tension doesn't add that much to hypertrophy.
No.
People think because they're getting more tired that it's more beneficial, whereas time under tension has less impact on hypertrophy. If you look at
training for strength.
Strength even less. But like if you're talking about hypertrophy, if you look at Helms' strength pyramids, I think time under tension is at the very, very top. As in like the least, the least
important,
impactful, important. Yeah. So it can add some benefit, but very, very little. You're more better off spending your time with more weight.
Total volume.
Volume, exactly. Because volume's way more important than time and attention.
Volume is the biggest driver of hypertrophy. I feel like we say that all the time, but people still ask, you know, should I do this or that, or change my exercise, shock my body with more movements? No, just lift more.
Lift more and progress. You know, you'll be surprised how long you can draw out one exercise for.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm more of an RDL than a touch and go, but some people touch and go pretty fucking well.
Yeah, and if you do, fantastic. But if you see your form start to drop 3 reps into a 10-rep set, then probably don't touch and go.
No.
Here's
a good one I want to talk about is stiff leg deadlift versus a Romanian deadlift. Some people think they're the same thing.
Yeah.
They're not.
No. One has a lot more knee bend and hamstring. Well,
stiff leg,
different areas of the hamstring that are going to be firing more efficiently. One has more glute activation than the other. So, break that down.
So if you think about, here's a little anatomy thing for hamstrings. They're what's called biarticular. So they do 2 points of articulation. So they articulate, so flex and extend at the hip and at the knee. So Romanian deadlift, because you're going to flex at the hip and flex at the knee, you're taking the hamstring slightly out in a Romanian deadlift. You're pushing the emphasis more onto the glutes.
Yeah.
So RDL, more glutes and spinal erectors. Stiff leg deadlift, you're taking the articulation out of the knee. So you're using a straight leg, because stiff leg, straight leg. You're taking that out, so you're putting all the emphasis onto the hips, that portion of the hamstring. So then it's a shitload of hamstrings and less glutes.
Yeah, and so I probably do mostly RDLs.
I'm not a huge fan of stiff legs purely because so many people hyperextend at the knee.
Yeah, and it can be, again, another kind of scary lumbar one if not done correctly.
Because if you're a stiff leg deadlift, your range of motion's really fucking short.
Yeah. Unless you've got super mobile.
And that's one thing I'll do. If someone's really, really mobile and they touch the floor very easy on an RDL, I might get them stiff legging, but then it's slightly different muscles,
or you can do it off a depth.
Or a depth, exactly. That's exactly it. Stiff legs, I don't mind them, but you'll see most people can't push their hips back enough when they've got the straight legs, and the bar will start to drift out. Yeah. So if you do them, do. I don't know why you double do when we say do. If you do them, you don't need to say a double do. Just pointing that out. If you do them, then keep them light.
Yeah.
I've seen people rupture hamstrings off. There was a guy in Good Life when I used to PT out of there. He was 1 week out of his comp, stiff leg deadlifts, and ruptured his hamstring literally off the bone.
All right, so let's not do too many more leg ones because otherwise we'll be here all day. But let's do a few glutes because that's what people really care about, and then we'll go into upper body. So let's go barbell glute bridge versus hip thrust off a box because I think that's a really important one. When you say a glute, there's so many different ways you call them. Some people call them a glute thrust. Some people call it a hip thrust. At the end of the day, your hips and glutes are moving, so who really cares? Whatever your coach wants to call it, it is what it is. But generally, I'll write in my girls' plans whether it's off the floor or whether it's off a box. And then when I write the box one, I'll write whether I want them resetting at the floor or whether I want them keeping the tension on. Yep. So again, more like an RDL versus a deadlift, so to speak. So a hip thrust from a box or floor that is resetting is more explosive, whereas obviously a somewhat touch and go deadlift, hip thrust, I guess, is more so from a hypertrophy, constant tension standpoint, stretch reflex. So yeah, I guess a couple of reasons why you do the two. From the floor, it's a shorter range of motion. So for a newbie, it's much easier to control the movement and for them to have better technique. You can also go a lot heavier. So that's probably one as well. And it also doesn't quite have as much, what did you say? I'm trying to word it right. But in terms of hamstring quad activation,
it's a shorter range of motion. So you're taking out certain portions of the strength curve. So when you dip all the way down off of a box,
less hammies.
You're bringing in the quads on the initial drive out of the hole, whereas off of the floor,
it's more stretch on the hamstrings. Off the box.
Off the ball,
So less hamstrings when you do them from the floor. So if I've got a client who's very hamstring dominant and we want to build the glutes more, then I might have them going heavier or higher reps from the floor.
Because you can literally think about lift that weight off the floor with just your butt. Squeeze your ass cheeks and that bar will come off the floor.
Very short range of motion.
But if you go into a full full range of motion off of a box and just squeeze your butt. You've taken it too far that your hamstrings need to come in first.
It's like a rack pull versus a deadlift.
It literally, I call the glute bridge off the floor the rack pull
of a hip thrust. Yeah, exactly. So that one's pretty straightforward, to be honest.
I'd say if you want to overload with a shitload of weight, so it looks good on the Instagram, do the hip thrust off the floor.
Yeah, but then people go, it's such a short range motion.
Yeah. Or if you're new to hip thrusting and you want to just kind of get good at it.
The other big thing that you got to think about is the glutes fire very well in a stretched position.
Yeah.
So you actually get higher rates of total glute activation from a box that's reset at the floor, which is why they're the most common one that you see performed.
Yeah.
Like I'm pretty sure that was in Brett Contreras' research that he did. But I still like from the floor for newbies, or I like from the floor for hamstring dominant people.
Yeah.
I like from the floor for anyone with major injuries to their hips or joints there that they really, or people that have bad technique and can't control that hip back angle.
Exactly.
So there's a few reasons, but for overall glute growth, then generally the reset from the floor is the best way of getting total volume and total stretch on the glutes.
On a box?
Yeah, with a reset.
Yeah,
with a reset. So that's why I'm saying the reset, because you can get more total volume than a constant tension.
Yeah, I think it's a simple one.
Yeah.
What else do we have? Should we go upper body?
Yeah, let's skip through like rope pull through versus
because it's the same
RDL.
thing. Rope pull through is kind of similar to
I
RDL.
can summarize them very briefly. Good morning's probably one we'll touch on. I think that, again, this comes back to risk versus reward. I would say I program good mornings for 40% of my clients.
Not many.
Maybe less.
It's quite advanced.
It's very advanced. You have to have such good technique, and a good morning is more of the angle on the hip is more of an RDL with the amount of knee bend. It's slightly more than a stiff leg, but you've got to then think about your upper back and thoracic a lot more than what you do in a normal barbell RDL. The reason that I really like them is it helps clients actually focus on a neutral spine. So if you're doing it, I usually encourage it with a lightweight control. It's not something I do as a heavy exercise.
That's the RDL.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're wanting load and volume, do an RDL. If you're wanting to work on hip shift, on neutral spine, on all of those things, or you've just got a more advanced client that's got a strong upper back or thoracic, then I would always recommend probably an RDL over a good morning, simply for that reason. I don't mind good mornings reverse hack squats. I have a lot of my girls doing that because it's more controlled. So there's different ways that you can do the same movement. I'm not a massive fan of a seated good morning.
I hate them.
I just think it's...
I will go and say I hate them.
I really hate them too. They're
no range of motion.
I've never ever programmed it.
Never will.
No.
I don't care if you're a coach that does. I will argue about this on this. Yeah. But it's just... the whole point in it is to stand up. And like for
strengthen your spine and your
spinal
core
erectors, and you're supposed to be slightly wobbly.
Yeah,
that's the whole point of standing. It's like
a kneeling hip thrust. Like, what the fuck is that?
Yeah.
Like, oh my god, like that's another exercise that I'm like, what is the point of that?
As in bar on the shoulders.
Yeah, bar on the shoulders. You've got no
squat
tension. There is literally no tension in your glutes.
Stupid.
When you are squatting down, you're not in a stretched position because you're now kneeling.
So a kneeling hip thrust.
Don't ever do them.
It's a squat in a Smith machine when you're on your knees. So you push your hips to the floor.
I tried them. Remember that day I tried them and I was like, this is shit.
I reckon I can load up 400 kilos of this. So there's no stretch, and then when you're squeezing at the top, the angle of squeeze is wrong.
Completely
because it's
wrong.
going straight down instead of horizontally.
So you need to think about force and load here, which is where physics and biomechanics comes in. So when you have a barbell across your hips and your hips are pushing down, where is the weight going? Down. So when you drive up, you have tension.
Yeah.
If you have a bar on your shoulders and your hips are pushing backwards and coming in, you have such a small amount of glute activation that you may as well just do a hip thrust, or you may as well just squat or deadlift.
You may as well just stand up and squeeze your ass cheeks, because that's literally what you're doing.
Top of a squat. Just a partial squat. There you go. It's the same thing. So some exercises that are fucking stupid and just a waste of your time. Seated good mornings, kneeling hip thrusts.
This is our opinion.
Yeah. Well, it is and it isn't.
But it isn't.
It's our opinion, but it's also science. Like, there's no force of gravity there.
No.
What's another dumb one? Let's think of some dumb ones.
I think we'll use that. We'll save that for another
what
one.
about standing external rotations with a dumbbell?
That's a big one, yeah. So in like a bicep curl angle.
Yeah.
That's, learn physics.
No gravity.
Look at where the force is going down, and when you're having to push against that force, if it's not going against gravity or the angle of resistance, then you're doing it wrong.
If it feels really easy and like you're not actually feeling anything, it's probably not worth doing.
No.
Like, yeah.
So,
okay,
well,
sorry, we went on a bit of a tangent there because I'm really passionate about those kneeling hip thrusts, okay? Because clients always ask me why, and also another one there that I'm just going to touch on briefly is a very controversial one, but the old cross sissy squat. The not a sissy squat, you know what it is? The cross body curtsy squat.
Curtsy squat, yeah.
Yeah, just another one that I'm like, why?
I never have, never will.
Never have programmed it, never will.
Why?
Why? That's what I was asked. Why are you doing a curtsy squat? A curtsy lunge? Oh, I've lost my words today.
I don't know. Because if you think about it, a lateral lunge where you're not curtsying, same muscles, but then you're eccentrically loading your adductors as well.
I heard a coach the other day say that it's a great glute builder.
How? It forces internal rotation and impingement of your hips.
It's so dangerous. It's so...
Not that, it's just...
Well, it is on the hips, but...
It's impingement of the hips easily.
And it doesn't promote... Unless you have perfect technique, it is very easy to do
no
it
one
wrong.
does.
The knees, you see the knees going the wrong way, you see the hip going the wrong way, and you're just like, this is just... That's what I mean by a bit more dangerous.
Yeah.
Like, it's high risk.
If you think about it, there's a lot of torsion in the SI joint.
Yeah.
Because you're supposed to be pushing your knee externally, and whilst your back leg goes the other way, you're basically pushing your hips the other way to each other.
I've heard people say it's a glute med builder.
Oh, okay. With your internally rotated knee. It's a good TFL builder.
You can't build the
Enjoy
glutes.
your hip impingement.
You physically cannot build the glutes in an internally rotated position.
No.
They don't...
That's the stretched bit of it.
They don't activate because they're not stretched. No. So... If a
That's
muscle,
like me trying to build my bicep with a straight arm.
Exactly the same. So our 3 exercises that we don't want to see girls doing anymore, if you listen to this podcast, curtsy lunge, seated good morning, kneeling barbell hip thrust, or Smith machine.
There's so many better. All right, they look a bit funky, but there's so many better. You're kind of wasting your time.
Yeah, which is where it comes back to the why, and also, do you give a shit what other people think? And if you're caring more about doing something for the gram and then actually doing an efficient movement, then have a little think about your why. Because as a coach, it's important, because if I went and put that on Instagram, went and did a kneeling hip thrust superset with a curtsy lunge, everyone would start doing it. And you know what? Yeah, it might look cool, but at the same time, if you're in a position where you're influential to other people out there, you got to be careful with what you put up.
I do, you know.
Yeah, you do.
My 1,600 followers.
You're growing.
Yeah, it's gone pretty quick.
Anyway,
if I showed you some of the exercises I do for my weird styles of training.
We try weird shit all the time.
All the time. Yeah.
We just don't put it on the ground because we're like, that was fucking stupid.
Yeah, exactly. I'm doing a lot of arm wrestling style training at the moment, so none of that's going on the gram for a while because it looks really fucking weird.
You know what I was really trying to set up the other day in the gym, and it took me about half an hour, and it was a packed gym. Everyone was staring at me like, what are you doing? I was trying to do a banded single leg hip thrust. You know how long it took me to set up a band through a bench to actually get that working efficiently? And it added minimal tension because it was really hard to get it in the right position. It was okay, but it was more the fact that it took me 30 minutes to actually set up.
It's like when you need 2 dumbbells, wrap a band around 2 dumbbells.
Like, I'm not programming this for a client because by the time they set it up and do all this, I've just wasted half an hour trying to not only get out of the band at the end, because I needed it really tight. So there's stuff that we try as coaches, and we say these things because we've probably done it and it hasn't worked, and we're like, okay, like you can reinvent the wheel a little bit, but at the same time there's staple exercises that they're there for a reason. Exactly. They're there because they work physically. Yeah.
Should we move on?
Upper body.
Okay, well, let's go a barbell bench press as opposed to a dumbbell bench press, flat bench press. Cool. Pretty similar exercises, but a couple of reasons. A bench press with a bar, you're taking out a lot of stabilizers that you need to stay nice and strong in the dumbbells. So you can shift a lot more weight in general on a bar as opposed to wonky wobbly dumbbells. So if you want to push more weight and look kind of badass, then bench press is a good one. Dumbbells offer more of a stretch onto the pecs and the front delt. And my main thing is dumbbells add more adduction. So you can adduct the dumbbells across the body. Like for me, people try and barbell bench press the dumbbells. So they push the dumbbell straight up, and really the whole point in using dumbbells is to add in the adduction. So you're pushing them from basically your armpits in the bottom to kind of nipples at the top. So there is that little bit of towards the midline, because the pecs adduct the humerus. So that gives you that extra bit of contraction on the pec. So if you think about that, dumbbells are going to offer you a bit more range of motion and a lot more pec. A barbell, you can really overload the triceps at the top because you can really shift a lot more weight.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
I
also find that if you're someone that isn't overly mobile and flexible through the anterior delts and that shoulder joint, then dumbbells, you can change the angle slightly with a little bit of supination, pronation.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
So you can go neutral at the bottom and pronated at the top. Well, I like sort of a 45-degree angle.
Yeah, that's what I was pressing last night.
It's so much nicer.
Yeah, semi-neutral pronated.
Semi-neutral, exactly, yeah. So 45 degrees. And then you're not impinging the shoulder at all. You get a nice stretch at the bottom as well.
Yeah, for a lot of my girls who don't really want to build their pecs, we do a lot of neutral pressing because then it builds more your front delt.
And triceps.
And triceps, which is where the girls do want to get stronger or have a bit of muscle. The other thing about a barbell is that if you've got wrist issues, and they can be pros and cons then of barbell dumbbell. So if you've got wrist issues, more so like mobility and problems there, like pain, I was getting a lot of wrist pain bench pressing, but nothing with a dumbbell because I was able to slightly torque the angle when I was having those wrist issues. So that's another big thing with the barbell. It's more rigid, so you haven't got that ability to kind of torque it to suit your body.
You can angle a dumbbell not only with supination and pronation, so anywhere from palms facing out to in, but you can also tilt the wrist slightly.
Yeah, exactly. So there's benefits there.
Barbell, you're fucked.
But the other good thing about dumbbells is that if you do have weak wrists, is it can kind of strengthen them because you're doing a unilateral movement as well, technically, even though you're going at a bilateral pace, but they're both having to hold the same amount of force. So, there's a few pros and cons to both. I like both.
They're both awesome.
Yeah, awesome exercises. Yeah.
People are afraid of bench press and they say that it fucks their shoulders.
Doing it wrong.
Your bench press technique sucks.
It sucks.
You probably need to work on the opposing muscles,
the bar path,
etc.
Your arch, mobility, your lat engagement, all of that. Yeah.
Are you an archer?
I am an archer.
Everyone should be an archer.
If you're not an archer, what are you doing?
Exactly.
Short-changing yourself.
Yeah. So if you're a flat backer, unless you've got amazing shoulder mobility,
really short arms.
That's it. Is a lot of flat backers tend to be short arms.
Yeah.
Slight arch, so shoulders back and down, which forces that little bit of an arch in the upper thoracic spine. It's great for your shoulders.
Also, most people that I see, it's dudes more than girls. When I used to PT a lot of guys, they would have shoulder pain when they bench. It was because they were benching flat.
Exactly.
As soon as you arch, you set your shoulder into a better position.
You externally rotate the shoulder.
It's safer. It's actually safer to arch.
It's literally why you do it.
Yeah, exactly.
So you should be arching. There is a point where if you're a powerlifter, if you're someone who's not a powerlifter and you're watching powerlifting and you see these exorcist style arches, that's going to annoy you. It does annoy me because I'm not a powerlifter. But they're trying to shift as much weight as possible.
Yeah, the goal is weight. Shortest range of motion.
For us, it's not. So.
Yeah, I think shortest range of motion. So the bigger the arch, the higher the chest, the higher they bench then into that arch and the bar path, they're going to optimize that. And you see some people bench and it takes them 2 seconds to get down because of that. So regardless of whether you're a powerlifter, you need to have some form of an arch. Even if it's very mild, but as long as you are just focusing on chest up, shoulders back and down, that's the simplest thing to think about. Whether you're using dumbbells, whether you're using barbell, whatever, same setup. That's probably the biggest thing. Because sometimes you see that where people dumbbell press totally different to how they bench press with a barbell. All of a sudden they're flat back dumbbell pressing and you're like, well, you want the same setup.
Same setup, just a little bit of adduction.
Exactly, yeah.
Here's a good one. Seated overhead pressing versus standing overhead pressing.
Yeah, cool.
Personally, again, this is more about, so morphology, not so much. It's more about goals.
Yeah.
So if you're someone that is going in the gym and after more bang for your buck, then standing because you want to work more of the body.
Yeah.
Seated, you're isolating the delts and the triceps a lot more.
Yeah, I love seated barbell presses for my bikini athletes. They're probably one of my favorites at the moment, purely for the fact that also if they've done, my girls train legs a lot, and if they've done deadlifts, squats, all of that the day before, and you've got to think as a coach how you're programming your sequentially, the sequence of your days.
Yeah.
So if you're programming a client to deadlift one day and their back's a little fried, you've had some back extensions in there, and then you go stick in an overhead press, which can be a little lumbar loading, then is that safe, or are you better off just getting them to do it seated? Like
the glutes are fatigued from the day before, so you're going to push into your lumbar and spinal erectors.
Whereas bench press would be fine, but I would probably go say bench to seated barbell press as like their compounds for that day. So you want to think about what is the point? What is the functionality? Am I doing this for strengthening the shoulders and hypertrophy in the shoulders specifically? Or am I doing this for full body movement, strengthening the core? When we say core, we mean abs and the lower back and, thoracic. So that's really it.
And what is your sport?
Yeah.
If you're a CrossFitter, there's not really that much seat, and an ollie lifter, there's not much seated overpressing. It's a lot standing.
And then it kind of comes back to dumbbells versus barbell in a seated as well. Why would we program a barbell over a dumbbell? And then a big one for that is mobility. If I have a client who has really poor shoulder and pec mobility, then I probably won't give them a barbell. And I love dumbbell presses. I think that you get, again, like exactly the same principle as a dumbbell chest press, in the sense that you can torque it, you can rotate the hand slightly, you can slightly neutral grip it if you're getting impingement in a really pronated position. So you generally will get a little more impingement in a barbell than what you would in a dumbbell, for the simple fact that you can do adjustment. Doesn't mean just go dumbbell press, because there's great benefits. You can push more load through a barbell, blah, blah, blah. So obviously more load, more volume, more growth. But you need to do more mobility work if you're going to do a barbell versus probably a dumbbell for that reason, unless you're super pronated with a dumbbell. So either way, you should be doing mobility work. But at the same time, don't shy away from a barbell because you're a little tight. Put the work in because they're really beneficial, and really
they train your upper back as well as your shoulders. So they're amazing. Overhead pressing is one of my favourite things. I prefer a lot of overhead pressing over bench pressing.
I agree.
The overhead press carries over to a bench press very well.
And from an aesthetic standpoint, like,
you can have a sick upper back.
Upper back and delts rather than pecs and front delts. Yeah, exactly.
Let's go. Here's a good one. In terms of open chain, closed chain, lat pull down versus pull up.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I think like...
Give me your take.
Oh dear, put me on
Put you on the spot.
Well, I love lat pull downs, again, kind of coming back to overhead press versus seated, in the sense of it's a full body movement when you're doing a pull up.
Yeah.
Okay. It's also a completely different movement because you're pulling up, you're not pulling down.
Yeah.
So you're recruiting different areas of your back. You are focusing more on your core, because in a stretch position, your core is very engaged. So as soon as you pull up, your abdominals are firing. The problem with a pull up is that you can generally overfire your traps a lot, and people generally will pull up through their upper traps and kind of shrug into the bar, into the like pull up position, and not have really good control of their lats. So I would say I prefer a lat pull down if it's a beginner and somebody I want to really control their lat activation and not overfire their traps.
100%.
But if it's somebody that wants to get stronger in, say, a deadlift and wants to do something more explosive, then pulling up, you're in a deadlift, you're pulling the bar up.
Yeah.
So that's going to carry over a little more.
Why are you doing it?
Exactly. The why. I also love it because it looks cool. And a lot of my girls are like, my goal is to do a
who doesn't want to do a pull-up?
Bodyweight pull-up. Yeah, exactly. Then you've got to look at, we're talking about a pronated... Are we talking pronated?
Wide grip.
Yeah, cool. So then you've got pull up, chin up would be more so supinated, pulling under the bar.
Yeah.
So let's talk, they're the same angle, so wide hands, pulling into the lats more. But yeah, so they're the main reasonings. I think that a lot of newbies have more control doing a lat pull down, and they're not able to isolate their lats as well when they're doing a pull up, because like I said, they shrug, they're wriggling around, they're trying to get stable. But then also fantastic if you do have a client that wants to strengthen their core, their balance, their, all of that sort of stuff. So pros and cons, I love both. Yeah. I use both, but it will again depend on the client. And I love the fact that with chin-ups, you can still progress them to even a client starting with a machine, then going to a band, then going to a jump eccentric control, and then going to a body weight. So you've still got ways to overload and progress, but also in a lat pull down, it's easier to overload and progress just with load. Yeah. So from a hypertrophy standpoint, I probably prefer a lat pull down a pull up, because not many girls can go 1 week 5 pull-ups, the next week 7, the next week 9, the next week like
it's like 1 year.
Yeah, so
you go from no pull-ups to 2 pull-ups
until you get to the point which has always been like was always my goal was to be able to do it with a weight plate on me. Yeah, and that was always easy when you're comp prepping and you're light.
Yeah, and you're light as fuck.
Yeah, that's the other thing. The lighter you are, the easier pull-ups are.
Yeah.
So if I've got a client who is
no legs,
let's say I've got a female who's 80 kilos and she's trying to lose weight, there's no way I'm going to give her probably even a banded pull-up because she's just not going to be able to do it, unfortunately. Or I'll say use a double band, use a machine. But once she loses 10, 15 kilos, then all of a sudden that pull-up becomes very, more achievable and we can program
you're like, I feel 15 kilos stronger.
Yeah, you don't want your client to feel like shit. So why would you give your client who's struggling with their weight already an exercise that is about body weight?
Yep.
Like, it's just...
That's a good way of putting it.
It's not very nice.
Association.
Yeah. Be nice to your clients.
Yeah,
make them
absolutely.
feel good. Yeah.
But they should leave the gym knowing they've succeeded in something.
Absolutely.
Not,
don't set them up to fail.
Shit at that.
Yeah.
I think smashed it, nailed it.
Thanks.
I think the lat pull-down is much easier as a beginner exercise. The pull-up is an advanced strength exercise almost.
But in saying that, just because we say a lat pull-down is a beginner exercise, it doesn't mean that you're too good for it.
No.
We do it every session.
The best of the best in the world do. All it is we'll use more weight. Simple as that. You can adjust the weight very easily on a lat pull-down.
Which is why there's technically no beginner and no advanced movements. It's more the difficulty of an exercise progresses.
You're a novice or a beginner.
Exactly, yeah. But any exercise, you never get too good for an exercise. You can still go heavier.
You can still get gains on push-ups.
Absolutely.
But you have to add more weight or do a shitload of push-ups. I remember the first time doing push-ups, you might have been able to do, 15 to 20.
I think that's how many I can do now.
You're probably going to do like 100.
No.
Well, me then.
For the females out there. Maybe on our knees.
1 to 5 when you start, now you can do 20.
Absolutely, yeah. So. And that's a lot of females' goals that I hear is body weight push-up, chest to floor, and a body weight dip, a body weight pull-up. And
that's funny actually, because then if we go regressing a bit to mindset, you said there... adding an exercise in that may make them conscious of their body weight.
Yeah.
Everything that females I find want to be good at, pull-ups, push-ups, and all these body weight related things. So,
is that subconsciously that us females always wanting to lose weight because then that will become easier?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Becoming stronger and lose some body weight. So
it's a good goal to have because I say that to a client sometimes if they want to do a pull-up. I go, that's cool, but it will be easier when you lose more weight. So use that as a motivator. Definitely CrossFitters and clients that are doing that as well. That's always a good incentive. Yeah.
We have a million exercises we could do.
Let's do one more.
Do you want to do one more?
Yeah.
Let's choose. We have barbell curls. We have hamstring curls.
Let's do barbell because we've done a lot of legs.
Barbell dumbbell curls?
Yeah.
All right, standing barbell curls versus dumbbell curls.
Yeah. What's your favourite type of bicep exercise?
I have no biceps, so none of them really.
Neither of us do.
Yeah, we don't really have biceps. No. I do like barbell curls, but I tend to feel it a little bit in my shoulder because the barbell is out in front.
And you're talking straight barbell or
straight barbell? Yeah. So I can't straight barbell very well because my wrist mobility is fucking awful.
I can't do them at all.
No, so we need an easy bar.
Yeah.
And then the only thing with that is once you start to pronate the grip a little bit, you bring the brachioradialis in more than the bicep.
That's probably why our biceps
we have massive forearms and not so much the biceps. So dumbbells offer more range of motion. You can go from neutral to supinated to do a Zottman curl where you go pronated. I'm not a fan of Zottman curls.
I program them in sometimes if I have a client who needs to get stronger grip. So I like them for grip strength.
It's multitasking.
Eccentric, yeah.
So you
and sometimes for funsies. They're an exercise.
That's a funsy exercise.
They got a bit of benefit. They're not stupid, but they're not needed. No. You know what I mean? They're not a necessity.
I prefer a straight bar reverse curl purely because once I've locked my thumb under that bar, I'm in that position.
The reason I do them for girls is usually the barbells are too heavy for them to do that.
Yeah.
So to even 10 15 kilos in a reverse curl for a girl's too heavy, but doing a Zoltman with 4 kilos is great, you know. So
good point.
The other thing, because I pretty much my hand a few years ago falling off a treadmill.
Oh, yeah.
So, and I also
dropped on the treadmill.
Yeah, dropped a barbell backwards on my hand. So if I'm in a straight bar, I can't fully extend at the bottom.
Yeah.
So I just get wrist pain. So yeah, using an easy bar. But I would say, to be honest, to get like more of a stretch on the bicep, my favorite bicep exercise ever is a slight declined bench. Yeah, so incline on, slightly declining the bench back from a seated position, having about a 30 to 40 degree angle on the bicep, and then curling from there, because you get a really nice stretch, but it also stops you from swinging your elbows if you do it correctly. So if you focus on elbows staying back, and arms staying back and lengthened and fully stretching down, then they're probably my favorite way to isolate.
You get
biceps.
a free rear delt and rhomboid session because you should be squeezing those whilst you curl.
Exactly. Yeah.
If we go into actual muscle-wise, barbell versus dumbbell, barbell curls, the bar stays in front of the hips. So if you look at the long head of the bicep, it's shoulder flexion as well. So you're flexing the shoulder slightly to hit the long head of the bicep and then curling through the short head. If you look at the dumbbells, if you pin your arms back, then you're stretching the long head, so you're taking that out and you're really targeting the short head. So it's different muscles, really. Dumbbells, I mean, you got to remember the bicep supinates the arm as well. If you're staying in constant supination on a barbell, you're not really getting that dynamic contraction. It's more of an isometric, whereas a dumbbell, you can go from a neutral up to a supinated, so you're getting a supinated contraction as well. So both of them, really. I really like to do a barbell first, big and heavy. Again, it's like your rack pull exercise, overloading that one, then going into a dumbbell when you pin your arms backwards.
I just don't train arms.
When I say I like that, once a year when I should be doing it once or twice a week.
I do about 4 sets of biceps a week.
You don't need big arms, though, do you?
No, because the problem is
big arms.
My biceps insert quite high. So if my actually biceps get a bit bigger and I'm a bit fat at the time, not fat, but like have more body fat, I'm not dieting, then it just looks like I have really fat pecs. So it just makes my arms look bigger in general. And like, unless I'm lean, they don't look that great. So I think we should pretty much wrap it up there because it's been quite a long one and we got to get some work done. But I think thank you guys for tuning into another episode. We hope you enjoyed it just with us, and we haven't had any fancy guests on for you this week. We know you've enjoyed having
We're the fancy guests.
Are we the fancy guests?
Yeah, you're welcome. You're a guest on my show and I'm a guest on your show.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I guess I just want to say like a bit of not an apology, but like a bit of a public, I guess, statement. We got a slight bit of negative feedback on one of the podcasts that we did, and I really took it to heart, and I didn't want to do any more podcasts. And
literally,
I said to Sean, I was like, I don't want to do it anymore.
You do them on your own.
And I think the biggest thing is like we're learning at this. Like we're not experts. We're at podcasting. Obviously I'd say we're experts in our profession, but we're not podcast experts, and it's a learning experience. And sometimes when you have guests on, it actually doesn't flow as well as what you think, and sometimes you kind of do have to somewhat jump back in to get the conversation back to the topic or the questions that you guys have asked.
Because it's like when you talk to me and I go on a tangent. And you sometimes have to jump in and say, shut the fuck up.
So I have to be that person, unfortunately, which kind of sucks because it makes me sound like I'm kind of talking over people, but I generally have a list of questions in front of me that I'm trying to get done, and I'm we've got a time frame and all of that. So being a host of a podcast it's not easy, but
pros and cons.
We want to thank all the people that give us really kind feedback. And you know what? Feedback's not a bad thing, because when I get that feedback, it made me go, okay, well, maybe next time, even if they are completely off topic, just let them go, and they're the guests. So
no, do you know what? I think it's the opposite. I think the art of a good interviewer is to be able to interject and push someone along. I think if you're against that, then you probably haven't listened to many podcasts.
It's hard. So I'm just saying it's hard. So thank you for everybody that's been really kind and said,
we had 90 positive comments and 2 negative
so
ones.
Don't focus in on those negative ones and keep going. And they're probably someone that didn't even listen to any of our other podcasts. So we just thank you guys, and we are going to have a few amazing guests coming up. So I have managed to wrangle in Victoria Faulkner. I don't know if I'm saying her last name correctly, but she's an amazing female hormonal specialist. So that's going to be a huge podcast, and I'm going to have a lot of questions already myself. So I probably don't need any extra ones, but I'm going to mainly ask her about the pill and contraception for females. So that's going to be a fantastic podcast. And then we're going to be doing one ourselves on binge eating, and we've got a few other cool ones coming up. But yeah, I just want to say thank you, and we're learning and we're trying our best, and
stay tuned because we've got more to come.
Yeah. You're going to wrap up today. That's it.
I wrap up every time, and I wrap up really badly. I say,
so this is why I have to host.
Tally-ho or goodbye. Or
something awkward. Thank you guys, and we'll chat to you in the next episode.
See you next time.